Hello, welcome back to Learn It from a Layman. I'm Carl Christensen, and I'm once again solo podcasting. So I'm doing this just for you. Generally, I podcast with my co-hosts who are also my brothers and or cousins and or friends and or other family relations or people kind enough to jump on and give us some insight into some topics. But today I'm just going to be doing it for your pleasure and hopefully for a little bit of educational purposes as well. Today, I want to talk a little bit about riddles. Talking about riddles, that sounds boring. So we're going to actually do 5 riddles together. Riddles are something that I have a passion for, but not only that, they're something that I think are useful, and specifically, so as if you've listened to these podcasts before, you know that I have some knowledge about computer science. Computer science riddles are very not important, they're very relevant because the way that you solve specific types of riddles, I guess, there are word riddles, and then there are kind of more algorithmic riddles, and that's an algorithm being essentially a way to solve a problem, a particular methodology. So all algorithmic riddles are questions actually sometimes in interviews for jobs for computer engineers or software engineers or computer science jobs in general. So these are things I've been asked. So a couple of the ones that we're going to discuss today are going to be ones that I was asked in job interviews years and years ago, and a couple others that I think are follow in that vein and kind of working up in complexity, but hopefully helping you identify particular ideas and how to solve riddles and how to algorithmically come up with solutions. So let's just jump in. Like I said, it's talking about riddles. That's not the best way to learn, I think. So we're going to actually dive in here and talk about 5 specific riddles. And first, we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts buckets riddle. So in this riddle, you've got 3. Once again, Barry, before all 5 of these riddles are going to be algorithmic. And that meaning these are not word riddles. This is not, oh, can you come up with some word that ties us all together or some way around this. Literally solve these mathematically, essentially, algorithmically. So 3 buckets full of nuts and bolts. So we're talking about metal, nuts that go on bolts. So in one bucket you have just nuts, one bucket you have bolts, and in one bucket you have nuts and bolts mixed. Each bucket is labeled incorrectly. So you are now given the task of picking, labeling them correctly, switching the labels so that they're all labeled correctly, based on one draw. So you can pick one piece of an item from one bucket. You don't get to look in. These are completely opaque. You can't. There's going to be no visual cues or anything like that. This is just you get one draw from one bucket. So if you go, if you don't get a handful, you just get one draw. So if you want to pause the podcast and think about it briefly, I'm going to walk you through how to solve this right now. So the first thing you need to know is in these algorithmic riddles is start with what you know. Identify each individual piece of information and how it is going to help inform the solution and what here is really necessary information. So if you think, okay, well, I can just grab one piece of one draw from any bucket, it doesn't matter. Well, that's actually not the case. So let's say you go up to the bucket labeled bolts, you pull out a bolt. Well, then you know, right? Then at that point you know, okay, well, this is labeled incorrectly, and therefore I pulled the bolt out. It can't be bolts, therefore it must be nuts and bolts. Great. However, what if you pulled a nut out of that bucket? You wouldn't know. So a potential solution is not a airtight solution and therefore not the correct solution. Getting lucky is not part of this riddle. You don't. This is you need to know for certain when you draw the item, regardless of what it is, that you're going to know what the solution or what all three buckets are. So once again, you need to identify pieces of information that you have, and essentially the only real pieces of information that you have are what's in the buckets. You know, bolts, nuts and bolts, and you know that they are labeled. Very importantly, you know that each bucket is mislabeled. Okay, and so you know that you're working with that. Those are the pieces of information that you have, and then you identify kind of the key bottleneck or the key point of information that needs to be identified. And so in this case, it is what the unique pieces, the unique bucket here is the nuts and bolts bucket. And so the one that is labeled nuts and bolts, you know that that's labeled incorrectly. Therefore, if you go up to that bucket and pick any item out of it, you will certainly know what is in that bucket, because if you pick a nut, you know that it has to be the nuts bucket. It cannot be the nuts and bolts bucket. If you pick a bolt, you know that it is the bolts bucket, not the nuts and bolts bucket. Once you do that, the other two buckets are just a matter of so then you know that, okay, well, the nuts, if I pick a nut out of this bucket, I now know that this bucket is the nuts bucket. Therefore, the bucket labeled bolts is going to be the it helps drawing this out sometimes as well. But the bolts bucket there's a label out there that still says bolts, right? And it cannot be that bucket. And you know that the bucket you just picked is not bolts because you just drew a nut. Therefore, you know that the bolts label needs to go on the I'll just swap it with the other bucket from which you did not draw. Therefore, you know which ones are nuts. That's the one you just drew. You knew which one is bolts, and then the last label is just the nuts and bolts label that goes on the last remaining bucket. So that is a relatively simple algorithmic riddle. Let's move on to the next. This is the 8 cue ball riddle. So you have 8 cue balls, all identical size and shape. Same color. Once again, no visual cues here, but you're told that one of these 8 cue balls weighs a little bit more than the other 7. So you need to identify which is the cue ball with that is slightly more, slightly heavier. And you have a scale, one of these two-sided scales where you can set offset weight. And so you can take the cue balls and put them on the scale and try to figure out which ones are the heaviest, which one is the heaviest. So the question here, the riddle is, how many times do you need to put the cue balls on this scale? Let's say you put 4 on one side and 4 on the other, and then you work down to figure out, okay, which one is the one that's heavier. How many times do you need to weigh the cue balls in order to figure out which one is the one that is slightly heavier? So again, if you want to pause the podcast and think about that briefly, I'm going to talk you through, once again, the way to identify what the solution is here. Once again, it's important to identify what the pieces of information are, what you're looking for, and what might be bottlenecks here. So you have this two-sided scale, or I guess it's technically called a double beam balance or double pan balance scale. A scale with two sides where you can set these cue balls on. You know you have that. You know you use 8 cue balls, and you know there's one that's slightly heavier. The brute force, logarithmic way to solve this would be to say, okay, well, I need to weigh all the cue balls, and so I'll take 4 and 4, put them on, and then I'll go from there. So it'd be 4, 4. Okay, this side's heavier. So I can rule out these 4. So I take the 4 that where they were slightly heavier, split them 2 and 2. Take the 2 that are slightly heavier, split them 1 and 1, and then I know which one. So that's 3 separate ways. Times putting the balls on the scale. Turns out that is not the quickest way. Not the fewest times to weigh these cue balls. You have to think once again outside of that normal. So you're trying to identify which one is the one heaviest. You don't need to weigh each and every ball. You don't. What you need to do is identify. Okay, what is the number of balls I can weigh that will give me the most information without. And so it turns out 4 and 4 does not give me the most information. If I take 3 and 3, I'm getting the most information possible. Okay, so essentially you're now getting additional information about from excluding 2 balls off the scale. And let me walk you through how that works. So if I put 3 and 3 on, then I know, okay, if they weigh the same, I know, okay, it's one of these 2 balls that I did not put on the scale, and then my second weigh will tell me. The second time putting these 2 balls on the scale will tell me which one ball is heavier. If it's one side of these 3 and 3 scale that is slightly heavier, then I take those 3 balls, I put 2 of them on the scale. And if those are the same weight, I know it's the ball that I did not weigh. And if one of them is obviously heavier, then I know that it is that ball. So in 2 separate weighing of the cue balls, I can get more information if I exclude some balls from the scale. That seems kind of counterintuitive, but if you think just about the amount of information that you're trying to get from each individual time weighing the balls, you can see how that you get actually maximize information by excluding specific balls off the if you know the algorithm of how you're going to solve this, and just think through it algorithmically in that way, saying, I know that these 2 balls I can weigh separately later, and work through that. So that's the second riddle I wanted to take you through. Now, we're going to move on to the bridge at night riddle. This is one that I've seen asked in a couple different interviews. This is a pretty popular one, so maybe you've heard this one before. But so this is you. There's 4 people. You could be one of these people, or you may not. Anyway, there's 4 people at a bridge at night. It is a treacherous bridge, and you need to get across this bridge. You need all of you to get across this bridge. However, there is only one flashlight, and you need the flashlight to get across the bridge, but the bridge will only has room for 2 people at a time. So you can only get 2 people on this bridge to get across it at a time with the one flashlight. And if you do not have the flashlight with you, you will fall off, or you'll die, whatever. So the problem here, the riddle is what is the fastest? Oh, sorry. Backtrack here. Each individual in your party will cross the bridge at a different rate of speed. So you have one individual that will take quite a while. Let's say an elderly person who will take 10 minutes to cross this bridge. Then you've got an individual who will take 5 minutes to cross the bridge. A person that will take 2 minutes to cross the bridge. And then a person that takes just 1 minute to cross the bridge. Now, so you can take 2 people across, but then you've got to send someone back with the flashlight to get the next person and go across that bridge until you get everyone across the bridge. The people that cross the bridge are going to take the amount of time of the slowest of the two, it's just going to, the amount of time to cross the bridge is going to be of the slower two. So if you're crossing the bridge with the, let's say, the 10-minute person and the 1-minute person, it's going to take 10 minutes to cross the bridge, obviously. You're going to go with the rate of the person that's the slowest. The riddle, the question is, what is the quickest in time? What is the smallest amount of time necessary to get all of the party across safely? Once again, you can pause it here and think through the riddle. I'm going to walk you through how to solve this. So in this case, once again, you've got to identify the pieces of information that you have and try to figure out what is algorithmically going to help you solve this as far as the information and what your bottlenecks might be and what solution is going to give you the optimized amount of time. So let's start with kind of everyone's default, at least most people's default, is to think, okay, so I've got the 10, 5, 2, 1. I know I need to get everyone across, so that's going to be one trip across, one trip back, one trip across, one trip back, one trip across. And so I need to figure out, okay, well, what is my ideal scenario? Now, the one that most people go to first is the idea that, okay, well, I need to get the one person, the 1-minute person, the person that's the quickest, being the one that comes back every time. So let's say I take the 1 and the 10, so that's 10 minutes, I come back, that's 11. The 1-minute person takes the 5-minute person, so that's now 16, comes back on 17, and then takes the 2-minute person and across with them, and that is 19 minutes. If you followed that. So the 1-minute person has gone across the bridge every single time, just taking the 10, the 5, the 2, and then coming back when necessary. So that's 19 minutes in that scenario. That is not the optimum solution. That is not the quickest you can do it. Once again, you have to identify pieces of information, what your bottlenecks might be here. So if you first identify, okay, well, I know that I've got a speedy individual on board here. I've got this person that can cross this bridge in 1 minute. Great, you've identified that. And so you think, okay, well, therefore that person needs to be the runner. They need to be the one that takes it across every single time. You have not thought all the way through to the end of the algorithm here, though, and that's the problem. You need to think all the way down. You need to kind of do a breadth first look at at this problem. You not only have a speedy individual, but you have a very slow individual, and another person, a 5-minute, that is, exponentially slower than this 1 and 2 minute individuals. So they're massive bottlenecks in your time. So what you need to think about is, okay, well, is there any way I can get these guys or girls or whatever, across the bridge together? Because if I could get them across together, then I've got rid of the 5 and the 10 minutes in one trip. So as soon as you identify that as a potential solution, you've got the workings. You just work it through, piece by piece after that. But that is the piece of information that is the most important, is to identify that bottleneck and think, okay, well, if I'm the 1-minute person is taking people across 2, 5, and 10, then I'm getting the 5-minute and the 10-minute both counting against my total, where if I can send the 10 and the 5 across together, it's just the 10 minutes that's counting against my total. So in this case, you think, okay, I'm going to send the 1 and the 2-minute people across together first. Then I'll send the 1-minute person back. Then the 5 and the 10 will cross. The 2-minute person will come back, and then the 1 and 2 will go across together again. So once again, 1 and 2 go across first. That's 2 minutes. 1-minute person comes back. That's 3 minutes. The 5 and the 10 cross together. That's 13 minutes. The 2-minute person crosses back over. 15 minutes. The 1 and 2 cross together again. 17 minutes. So 17 minutes is the solution, and that is how you get there. So once again, that's all about identifying not only the problem, but potential solutions, and looking at the whole problem before trying to brute force solve for an optimized solution that you have not, as of yet, identified all the potential issues. Okay, we've got two other riddles here, and these are slightly more. The first one's pretty elegant. The second one is takes a little bit more working through. So that one will take a couple, let's say 5 minutes in the best case scenario. But this fourth riddle is the Othello pieces riddle. So in this riddle, you have 33 Othello pieces. And if you don't know what an Othello piece is, it's essentially like a black and white stone where completely smooth, where one side of the stone is black and one side of it is white. And so this is a game piece. Othello is a board game. And so one side of these game pieces, these little stone pieces, is completely black. One side of it is completely white. They're completely smooth. They all feel exactly the same. All right. So you've got 33 Othello pieces, and you are set at a table. You're told that you're told that there are 33 pieces in front of you. You're completely blindfolded. You can't see, and you're told that of these 33 Othello pieces, 10 of them are white side up, the rest of them are black side up, and you're given the task of splitting them, these 33 Othello pieces that are just in front of you on this table. You need to be able to split them into two groups where there are the same number of black and white Othello pieces in both groups. So that is the job. That is the riddle. Now, what you can do is you can split them to any number of groups you want. You have to end up with two groups with identical numbers of white side up pieces in both groups, and so you can flip the pieces. You can group them as you see fit, but you need to end up with identical number of white pieces in both groups. Again, pause the podcast if you want to think about it. I'm going to walk you through how to solve. So here you need to, once again, there's not a lot of information, so you need to identify the pieces of information that you have and see how they might relate to an algorithm that would help you solve. So you know that there are 33 pieces. That's an odd number. So you can say, okay, well, I know that groups don't need to be of the same number because that's not possible. Right? I need to end up with two groups. I can't just throw some off the table. So I know that I don't need identical numbers of Othello pieces in both groups. And then really the only other piece of information that you have, other than knowing that there's one side's black and one side's white, is that there are 10 that are white side up already. Pretty much the only information that you have. So instead of trying to come up with some elaborate solution where you somehow turn all the Othello pieces on their side and balance them in that way, this is once again an algorithmic riddle. So you need to figure out, okay, well, what is the way that I'm going to split these into two groups successfully and know for certain, without having seen these at any point, that I have the same number in both of white side up pieces in both groups here. So again, 33 pieces. You know that 10 of them are white side up. So there, you have to start working on those pieces of information. So let's say I took 2 pieces of Othello pieces and started a different pile. Do I know how many white side up I have in either pile? And this is just with 2 pieces. No, I don't, right? Like I don't know. I know I have 31 and 2, but I could have grabbed 2 of the white side up, I could have grabbed 2 of the black side up, or I could have grabbed the mixed set just for my little group of 2. So that's not going to help, right? So I'm going to quickly figure out that, okay, I don't know, I don't have any other information than these numbers. Well, then that number 10 must be pretty important. So let's say I grab 10 pieces of the 10 of those Othello pieces and create a different group based on that. I have 23 and 10. I don't know how many are in each group, but what I do know is that I've got an identical number here in the one group, 10, as I have total number of white side up pieces in the whole thing. So let's say I then flip over every single one of those 10 pieces. All right. So now I'm going to flip every one of those 10 pieces over. Does that help me at all? And so then you have to think through, how does come up with an example? Let's say of those 10 pieces that I pulled over, none of them, 0, are white side up. Well, then you can see real quick, oh, if I flip them all over, then I'm going to have the same number in both. I'm going to have 10 white in this pile of this group of 23, and I'm going to have 10 in this group of 10 because I just flipped all of these black side up ones to white. That's nice and clean. Great. But is that going to cover all scenarios? Well, let's say you grabbed, coincidentally, all 10 of the white ones. Flip them all over. Well, then you have the same number of whites in both because, once again, you've got 0 and 0. Once again, very clean. But let's say you grabbed 6. You just into 6 white of the white side up pieces and 4 of the black side up. And now you're flipping them all over. All right, so you grab 6 of the white side up, so you have 4 left in this bigger pile of 23. And now you're flipping all of the ones here in this pile, this group of 10. Well, what does that leave you with? It leaves you with 4 white side up in this group of 10 and 4 in this group of 23. So, and you can do that for any number you want, but that's obviously that's the solution, right? So you have, as soon as you grab those 10 pieces out and flip them, you're always going to have the same number of white side up pieces in both piles because you are now just duplicating, you're just taking the limited amount of information you have and using it to algorithmically solve. Say, okay, I know that there are 10 white side up, so I'm going to grab 10 out of here and flip them, and that's going to give me a mirror image of what have the distribution of white side up and black side up pieces in this other group. So the Othello puzzle, that is one that is my coworkers and I enjoyed quite a bit. So let's hit this last riddle. This one is the most complicated. So if you're driving and listening to this and you want to do this by yourself before listening to my solution, you probably want pencil and paper. Otherwise, you can just listen through and I will explain this for you. So in this riddle, you've got 25 racehorses. And these horses are, they're your horses, and you need to figure out what are the 3 fastest of these racehorses. I've got 25. I need to find the 3 fastest. And you have a track where you can race 5 at a time. You can race 5 horses at the same time. What you do not have is a stopwatch or any way of keeping track of time. So all you can do is race the horses in order to figure out which ones are the fastest. You can't measure time or compare times. So the riddle here is, so you have 25 horses, a race with a track where you can race these horses 5 at a time. What is the minimum number of races that you need to do to find the 3 fastest horses? Now this is also given the obviously untrue, but in this case riddle, the given fact that the horses will always race at the same speed. Okay, so these horses are robots. All right, they will always race at the same speed. You need to identify the 3 fastest, and of these 25, and the fewest number of races possible in this racetrack of 5 horses at a time. So if you want to pause the podcast now and think through it and or write down what you're thinking, this one takes a bit of thinking and a bit of time, but I will walk you through here on the podcast how to solve it. So once again, identify what pieces of information you have and what algorithm, what pieces of information you're going to be able to build on and use. So you know that what you have available to you is only going to be relative speed. You're only going to have the speed of a horse relative to other horses in its race. You don't have time, therefore you can't say based on one race that the horse that wins that race is faster than any of the other horses, any of the horses that it did not race, right? Because you don't know. You don't have any way of keeping track of time. So let's start with, once again, just this brute force, the idea of, okay, well, I want to race each horse in this group of 5. So it'll be 5 races where I just have each 5 different horses in each race. So that gets me through all 25. All 25 horses I've raced, and I have a winner of each one of those races. And quickly you'll think, okay, well, that's a problem. I've got a problem though. So I know these are the 5 that have won the races, but how do I know that the horse that won race number 1, so the first winner of the first race, is actually faster than the horse that came in third in race number 2? Because maybe you just got 5 slow horses in your first race and he was the fastest of the slow horses. So you've identified a problem here, right? So you've got some information, some relative information of all 25 horses, but you have no way of getting information across all of these races to play well together, to percolate across these race boundaries. So you think, okay, well, now I need to figure out what how these races, each of these 5 first races, relate to each other. So you think, okay, well, I'm going to take the fastest horse in each race and race them. Seems like a good solution, right? So you're going to get some information from that. So this is race number 6. You take the fastest 5 horses, so the winners of the first 5 heats, first 5 races, now are racing against each other. So you race those. So now you have some relative information and some information that helps you extrapolate across all the first 5 races. So you can figure out, okay, well, the winner, the overall winner, the fastest horse is actually the fastest horse. You've now identified number 1. Great. There can't be any way that another horse is faster than that horse, because each other entry in that heat that he just won beat all the horses in their respective races. Therefore, if he beats each one of those, he's beating, by extension, he's beating all the other 24 horses, or all the other 20 horses as well. So you identified, okay, that is my fastest horse. The problem comes when you're now looking at, how do I find number 2 and number 3, right? Because is horse number, the horse that comes in second in that race, in heat number 6 of the winners, is that horse actually the second fastest horse? Because might it not be the case that in the first heat, let's say your fastest overall horse has come from the first heat, the first race that you did it all, right? Your fastest horse was was from that race, from that heat. So is your second fastest horse the one that came in second in heat number 6 of the winners, the race of the winners, or was your second fastest horse actually the horse from the first heat that the overall winner beat first? So already you've identified, okay, I don't know. I can't know that. I can't know if the person that came in, the horse that came in second in the first heat or heat 6 is actually faster. So I know I need to do at least another race, at least one more. But is that going to give me enough information? And how am I going to find out the third fastest horse, because isn't that exponentially more difficult? Well, then you got to start thinking all of it through. You got to figure out, okay, well, what is all the information that I have? I'm going to do kind of just a quick walkthrough of what you need to know here, and that for finding the second and third fastest horses, the question really is, right, is the horse that came in second and third in heat 6 actually second and third, or is the second and third fastest horse from heat 1, or is the third fastest horse, because actually from heat 2, assuming that your second fastest horse is the one that came in second in heat number 6. Maybe the third fastest horse is not the horse that that came in third in heat 6, but actually was in the second heat racing against the second overall fastest horse. Maybe he was faster than the one that came in third in heat number 6. So you have to think through, okay, well, what horses do I need? What horses could potentially be the second and third fastest horse? And what that boils down to is in heat number 6, you need to race the horses that came in second and third. So you got 2 of your 5 right there. You need to race them because they might be your second and third fastest, and it would make sense. And if you do figure it out and draw it out, you'll see that that's the case. You need to take the second and third fastest horse from the first heat that the overall winner was in. The fastest horse overall in heat 6, whatever his original heat was. So in my example, heat 1, you need to take the horses that came in second and third in that heat. So now I've got 4 horses. And then my last horse is going to be the horse that came in second in the race, the heat number 2, of the second, the horse that came in second in heat 6, his original heat. So once again, in my example, heat number 2, where where your overall number 2 horse came from, you need to take the one that came in second in that heat. So you've got the winner from heat number 2 and the second horse from heat number 2. You've got horses 2 and 3 from heat number 1, where your fastest horse was, and you don't need to race him anymore. You know that he's the fastest. You don't need any more information about him. So horses 2 and 3 from heat 1, horses 1 and 2 from heat 2, where so that's second in the second overall in heat 6, and the one that came in second to him in the original heat, and then your third fastest horse in heat 6. So once again, that will give you the 5 horses right there. And race number 7 will then definitively give you the second and third fastest horses, because you now identified all the horses that it might be. So hopefully, if that didn't make a lot of sense, you can go back and listen to it again. Podcasts, not a perfect medium for explaining riddles all the time, but hopefully useful, and if you're listening to this while you're on a commute or in a plane or whatever you're doing, this is going to help you kind of think through what all the potential possibilities might be, and pull out some paper and try to come up with some solutions here, because that last one is one that you kind of need to see written out, and draw some lines and circle some horses to figure out, to really have it make sense in your head. But 7 total races is the solution there, for identifying the 3 fastest horses. So that will bring us to the end of all 5 of those riddles. And once again, I hope that in doing these riddles, it can help you think kind of algorithmically. So in this family of riddles, it really comes down to identifying pieces of information, maximizing the information that you have, and really identifying all of the potential bottlenecks and or places where the information might be useful in your algorithm. So once again, algorithm is, I've said that a bunch of times in this podcast, but it can be a scary word. All it means is a particular method for solving an issue. So solving a mathematical problem. Riddles can really help you with your analytical thinking, and they can really help you identify, what in your life you can solve. So it turns out in life, a lot of things can be boiled down to something like a riddle. So try to analytically solve, try to algorithmically solve, try to come up with these solutions, and riddles can help you develop that part of your mind, and if nothing else, they'll prepare you for your computer science interview where you're trying to get the job. So I hope this was a fun podcast for you. I hope this was useful, and Go share these riddles with your friends and family, and come back and listen to our next podcast. We'll talk to you then.